First of all, thank you from my heart, from all of our hearts, to all of you for coming. She so loved you and loved this church, and thank you. As I think about my mom, one of the things I'm impressed with is she was born in 1919. And if you think about that history, you know, the American Civil War had only finished a generation beforehand. There are pictures of her grandfather in his Confederate uniform. Right? In 1919, the World War I armistice had just been signed. So American doughboys were coming home in droves, filling the unemployment line, right? It was a darker, slower world. Homes more often were lit by kerosene lamps than by electric light bulbs. There were more telegraphs than there were telephones. Yes. There were more trains and horse-drawn buggies than there were cars, those Model Ts or Model As. Charlotte was born into a world where women could not vote. They could not own property or keep a job if they chose to marry. And of course, the expectation was women would marry. By the time she was a teenager, her mother would have died from the cancer of that time, tuberculosis. And indeed, her mother was an incredible artist, musician, pianist. But my mother never heard her mother's voice because tuberculosis had struck her larynx. But she could whisper, and she could whistle beautiful lines of Mozart or Bach or Beethoven. And my mother grew up playing and practicing the piano at 6 a.m. in the morning. And she would miss a line, and her mother would say, "Charlotte, redo that line." And it would make her so mad because everyone else was asleep in the house and she was practicing the piano at 6 in the morning. By the time she was a teenager, her mother would have died. She would have lived through the Dust Bowl, which certainly did not spare Seymour, Texas. She would have lived through the Great Depression. She became accustomed to her father being paid in produce rather than money. But she learned such love and such music and such joy in those dark, different times. And over the century, she experienced everything the 20th century had to throw at her. World War II, Vietnam War, with my brother, the Vietnam vet, writing letters every 3 or 4 weeks, us waiting for her to be part of that war. And by the end, in her 90s, she was proficient with email, Facebook. Incredible, really incredible. She was funny and thoughtful. I keep thinking of her dancing. She would grab Pam and me some mornings and teach us how to polka. Right? I mean, there was no music on. It was in her head. And she would sing it as we polka around the house. But then that night, we would certainly get our homework done and done on time. A few years ago, Mother gave me a Methodist hymnal, the ones you have in front of me. She wrote on the inside, "Dear Pat, always keep a song